Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask an awful lot of questions. You can also become a member at patreon.com/The Bitter Truth, and you can get some fabulous swag to make your life better. And check out the latest essay up on TexasFreePress.com, Guns, Gays, and Abortion. The title is supposed to be that way, so read the piece and see what you think. Today, I've got a great guest that I'm looking forward to talking to, Dr. Art Markman. He is a professor of psychology and marketing at University of Texas, Austin, otherwise known as Texas, if you're from around here. He's the director of Human Dimensions and Organizations at UT. He's also the co-host of Two Guys on Your Head at KUT, also heard on most NPR stations. He's the author of many books, including Bring Your Brain to Work, Smart Change, and Cognitive Psychology. Dr. Art Markman, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm good, man. I'm good. Thank you for doing this. Appreciate you coming on the show today. We've gone a little off the beaten path from you. I'm usually political stuff and, always working to get into the more social, cultural things. And buddy of mine turned me on to some of your stuff, and I was reading on you, and I was really glad that you agreed to come on the show.
Yeah, this will be great fun.
Hey, so let's. How did you get here? How did you end up at UT?
So I. You're at the mercy of the academic job market when you go into academia. I've been very lucky in my career. I was a graduate student at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, which is the world's greatest place to be in graduate school because there's nothing else to do. And then I worked for 2 years at Northwestern outside of Chicago, 5 years at Columbia University. And I had interviewed here at Texas in 1993, and they went in a different direction with the job. But they came back to me in 98. They had another position open. They asked me to interview. And at the time, in all honesty, I thought I was going to use that as leverage to better my situation at Columbia, where I was. I grew up on the East Coast originally. And I just found myself wandering around Austin, trying to figure out why I wanted to live in New York. And I figured, well, if I could come up with 3 good reasons, then I would stay in New York. And 2 weeks in, I could only come up with one reason, which is that almost every relative I've ever had lives within 50 miles of New York City. And the next thing I knew, I was living here.
Well, that's as good a reason as any. These epiphanies aren't that grand. They come pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, no, this is a great place to live. Plus, UT is University of Texas, a wonderful institution. The psych department at Texas is about the 8th ranked department in the country. It's so at professionally, personally, pretty much at every level, this is just a great place to be. And almost 22 years later, I haven't really changed my opinion on that.
Okay, very cool. So you don't mind the growth and everything. You're good with that.
No, I can, listen, I came from New York City. It's not getting bigger than that.
Yeah, I'm from L.A., and people complain, and, well, we don't want to be like Los Angeles. I say, you guys got a ways away from being like Los Angeles.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Hey, so let's jump into kind of what you've been doing. I read a little bit about what you're doing with narcissist personality disorder, but for some of the listeners who probably hear a lot of these terms thrown around, I guess the simple thing first is, what is narcissism?
Yeah, so I like to just to kind of put a context around this. I mean, I like to try to bring as much psychology to people outside the field as I can, because I think people will live their lives better knowing that. And narcissism is a topic that I've written a lot about in that sphere that is endlessly intriguing to people, because narcissists are people who think of themselves as being extraordinarily special in a way that they feel like information should flow from them to the outside world, that they should be running things, that people should be listening to them. And the funny thing about narcissism is there are 2 real strands of narcissism, one of which is relatively benign and the other is not. And we can kind of dig into that. But overall, it really is this reflected in this idea that if you really think you are special compared to everybody else, and as a result, everybody ought to be paying attention to you, that's kind of the calling card of narcissism.
Right. And I've dated a few, so there's that. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, there seems to be like a shutdown. And I don't know if this is tied in. I mean, there seems to be like a fear of conflict with some of these folks. That seems to be a thread that I find common.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, so here's the thing. If you're a narcissist, then, like I say, there's really two strands of this narcissism. And one strand, the relatively benign strand, is what you could call the grandiose narcissist. And grandiose narcissists have a pretty healthy self-confidence. And so for them, and you see a lot of these grandiose narcissists represented in politics, in acting, in probably among professors, folks who put themselves in a position of being listened to by others. And if your sense of self-confidence is strong enough, then in some ways the biggest problem you face is you're not paying a lot of attention to other people. And so, there's not the extraordinary conflict that you get with the other type of narcissist, the vulnerable narcissist. I'll talk about those folks in a second. Mm-hmm. What you get there more than anything else is they're just not listening. And so, if you disagree with them, they're really, your voice is kind of insignificant to them. The flip side, the other kind of narcissists, the ones who are really, I think, potentially dangerous are what are called the vulnerable narcissists. And for them, the big difference there is they don't have that same healthy self-confidence. And so what they're doing is using everybody else's accolades, everybody else's, the nice things everybody else says. They're using that to prop up their self-esteem because they really just can't maintain it internally. And the reason that that's so dangerous is because for them, when everyone is telling them how great they are, all is well, because they're hearing what they want to hear. When they start hearing criticism, then this becomes particularly devastating. And so they now need to shut that criticism down, which means potentially flying into what's called a narcissistic rage, mm-hmm. which means just getting extraordinarily angry at anybody who dares to confront them on something, and also to really go out of their way to surround themselves only with folks who are likely to agree with them, which means disassociating themselves with people who disagree, and that can create tremendous amounts of conflict and energy, negative energy. And so the vulnerable narcissists, particularly if they end up in a position of authority in an organization, can be a real problem.
Well, and to speak to your point a second ago, you said that they surround themselves with people who largely agree with them, like yes people. Where does the conflict arise if they're always surrounded by sycophants?
Well, that's it, right? I mean, they're looking for people to prop them up. And so they're going out of their way. Now, what's interesting is, what's dangerous is when you find somebody who's a narcissist and they are, and they're competent, they're reasonably competent. They've got some skills, because then they rise up within organizations. And of course, initially people, lots of people like to hitch their wagon to this is going to torture a metaphor, but to hitch themselves, I guess, to a shooting star. And so right. If you see somebody you think is moving upward, you may want to try and rise with them. And of course, the narcissist is trying to surround themselves with people who are going to tell them how great they are. So they're going to bring those people into their inner circle, and you can create this real cadre of mutually reinforcing energy that'll and those folks will rise with that competent narcissist until the day that they do something wrong, and that the wrong could be defying the narcissist, but in some cases it might also be, if you've hitched yourself to one of these narcissists and it turns out you're pretty competent as well, and people start to recognize you for your talent. Now, that narcissist begins to see you as competition. Mm-hmm. And so even if you've never been anything but a yes person to that narcissist, now your competence and the recognition of your skills is now crowding out some of the glory that goes to the narcissist, and you can take both barrels in the chest from them after that.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and then And there seems to be like a level of sociopathic tendencies with a lot of these people, right? I mean, is that what is it? Not all narcissists are sociopaths, but all sociopaths are narcissists, or is that not true?
I think that's a reasonable characterization, right? I mean, like as I say, the grandiose narcissists are, they're pretty benign, but I think that when you find people who really are trying to be quite manipulative, there's been a lot of research in the psych literature lately about what has to be my favorite name for any construct in psychology, which is the dark triad. Always sounds like there should be organ music playing in the background as soon as you say that. Exactly. But the dark triad is psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. And so you have folks who, in addition to being a narcissist, are exceedingly manipulative. That's the Machiavellianism. They're good at manipulating others and have no real guilt around that. And psychopathy, which again is, an absence of real guilt for doing things and a real belief that the ends justify the means. And so, you get that that set of behaviors together, and you've got somebody who is just, can really create havoc because they're going to use people to their ends without really caring where those folks end up and what happens to them in the long run.
Sure. And it's, I got a couple friends going through some stuff with narcissist significant other, marriage, life partner things, and in the interest of transparency, one of those folks is actually who turned me on to you, and I think he's read several of your books. You got to talk to this guy, and the funny part was I have another psychologist who I'd brought on the show a few times. She's a sex therapist. I'd reached out to her, and she was like, "Oh yeah, no, there's not a whole lot to that." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well," but I really wanted to talk to somebody who could shed light on this, because what I have seen, personally, and just living through others, the one tendency that I've seen with narcissists is that whatever help you did give them, they completely disavow that it even existed. Like they did this on their own. I got here by myself. Like you're not even acknowledged or mentioned, pretty much ever again. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. Well, again, sticking with this vulnerable narcissism, because you're trying to prop up your own self-esteem, you are. I mean, to some extent, everyone is the hero of their own life story.
Right.
But for narcissists, they're not only the hero, they're the only protagonist in the story. They have overcome tremendous odds against everyone who is out to get them, and have found ways to succeed despite that, and largely on their own through the sheer force of their own intellect, personality, and other positive characteristics. And so, any help that you gave them was insignificant, in large part because to acknowledge that help would be to diminish the self. So one of the things about narcissism, and particularly the vulnerable narcissism, is this idea that it's a zero-sum game, and that if I acknowledge your help, that has diminished me in some way, because how special could I be if you had to help me? As opposed to other folks who may be also very successful and even in positions of power and authority, who will recognize the assistance of other people and the importance of other people in getting to where they are, and who at no point see a conflict between acknowledging the help that other people gave and their own success. So that's one of the big hallmark differences between narcissists and other folks. And so, you might think that you're somehow putting yourself in a position where you're owed something by someone because you helped them, but if it's a narcissist, that help is not in the long run going to be acknowledged as a central part of their own personal narrative.
So a second ago, when you when you talked about the the dark triad, the Machiavellian, the psychopathy, and the narcissism, when do you use the term psychopathy in terms of like psychopathic, like a killer?
Well, so psychopath is really, not all psychopaths are killers, right?
Okay.
And not all killers are psychopaths, but it's this is really, so psychopathy is really a spectrum of behaviors that really is focused around this idea that it is you're just trying to use the world around you to your own end. And again, it's the ends justify the means. It's not, you're not really driven so much by a moral code of any kind, but rather by what it is that you can achieve by whatever means necessary. Mm-hmm. And that's a spectrum of behaviors that can cause a lot of problems because, you can end up using people in ways that don't benefit them and in order to try to get what you want.
Right.
And that's really, taken to its extremes, that could mean someone who's actually willing to kill for their own beliefs, but that's not a necessary outcome.
Well, not the beliefs, but the protection of their own self-esteem, right? I mean,
Sure.
I was involved in something several years back, and unfortunately, it ended in a murder that I testified and stuff like that. But the person who killed the other guy, it was a love relationship, didn't go very well, and it was as though she couldn't, not as though, I mean, she genuinely couldn't handle like any of the rejection, and then being relegated to sort of a friends with benefits kind of a thing, I think. And then she just lost it, and it was brutal, you know. And so I mean, and it was just that whole preservation. To me, I just saw it as like this preservation of self. How dare you, do this to me, kind of thing. And
right. I mean, right. So that is certainly another characteristic that you can see with psychopathy. So it's I think in many situations where we encounter, folks who have this dark triad, it's in things like workplaces where the outcomes tend to be, not so much violent as, people getting fired or dismissed or, somebody who's spent their career working for a place and now finds themselves out of a job because their boss sees them as a threat of some kind. Which is still personally devastating. Mm-hmm. Probably not as devastating as being murdered, but it's losing a job is
it's up there.
One of the biggest stressors that somebody can experience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, excuse me. Well, how big of a role does this play, like in infidelity? I mean, I imagine it would play a huge role in infidelity, but not all people that cheat are necessarily narcissistic, right?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I think that narcissists, to the extent that they are believe themselves to be special, and as a result often believe, and this is also related to this notion of psychopathy. If you believe that you're very special, that the rules don't really apply to you, then the fact that you are in a monogamous relationship, that rule is a guideline. Right, not an ironclad rule, mm-hmm. and of course, the other piece to it is that engaging in a romantic relationship with someone is a great way to feel special. I mean, everyone remembers the beginning of some of their beautiful relationships in which and in that moment, you and the other person feel like you're the only ones on earth, and someone who thrives on that feeling and needs that from other people, mm-hmm. is going to end up seeking that regardless of what their current relationship status is.
Well, and then, but isn't that the thing though too? Like, aren't we all aren't we all narcissists to kind of a degree? Like we have doesn't that kind of fall into like the self-preservation mode, or is narcissism its own extreme?
Well, narcissism. I mean, look, if you were to give, there are measures of narcissism. There's, for example, the narcissistic personality inventory, and if you look at the items on that and talk about the degree to which you believe people should listen to you and that people should pay attention to the things you say and things like. I mean, to some degree, everybody will answer yes to some of the questions that are on the inventory, and that doesn't make you abnormal or dangerous. It's having all of those characteristics that is potentially problematic. And so, look, everybody loves to be made to feel special by somebody else.
Right.
That's one of the joys of the early. It's one of the reasons that romantic comedies are a thing, is because then you get to kind of live that vicariously through a movie in 2 hours.
Yeah, no kidding.
And why the movie ends after the first kiss, because nobody wants to watch the relationship go from being really special to just being a relationship. So
right.
so
those movies are called dark, by the way.
Well, yeah. So I think to some degree we all have, we all enjoy that. But the question is, to what degree does this become something that is a necessary part of your life, where you just need to keep experiencing this, and that, I think for many people in the world, right, you have other joys, right? You can, it is the joy of raising a family or being in a committed long-term relationship that can be sustaining for people, and that you're not necessarily continually in search of that feeling of newly being in a relationship.
And the other thing too that I find with some folks, and this is, again, I've not done studies or anything like that, just personal, my own little microcosm survey. I find that they're really good at a couple things. They're really good at giving advice, not really good at taking it. And they're also really good at dishing out shit and not really good at taking it. And, a hallmark of what I've done my whole life, pretty much since I was probably about 12, 13 years old, I realized that I got better laughs when I was self-deprecating. And I would reserve the insults for those who would insult me first. So then it became kind of known. We used to call it bagging when I was a kid, right? And became known, me and a couple of guys, you didn't get into that with us. Because we're going to destroy you. So we were, you left us alone unless you wanted to be severely embarrassed, right? But otherwise, it was always pretty self-deprecating. I found that got bigger laughs when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And now as an adult, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and that's a completely different orientation. I think that's right. I think that if you think you are the gift, then you give advice. You don't necessarily take it, and you take the insults of others more seriously than you need.
Way more seriously, yeah.
Particularly because, as you point out, if you think about just normal social interactions, I mean, a good-natured ribbing is part of every friendship,
right?
Where you're giving grief to somebody else, and that's and so you have to part of the social grease that allows people to succeed in environments is that ability to make the quick-witted comment, but also to accept somebody else's superior line when in the event that they get one, although they better watch out because you're coming back for them at some point. But and the other thing is, I think that the most, one of the things you find with really quick-witted people who are good at insults is that they will find the insult wherever it lies, even if it turns out that the ideal recipient of that insult is themselves.
Right.
And so if you think of a good line before everybody else, even at your own expense, then, you take the shot, right? I mean, there's in the land of insults, there is no such thing as an own goal.
Right.
Right. So if you fire off a zinger at your own expense, I mean, people will still marvel at the technical wizardry that went along with it, even and forget pretty quickly that you did it to yourself.
Well, and that's that's the thing too with a lot of narcissists. The difference I find between them and what I would call like normal people, and I know a lot of normal people that can exist in the self-deprecating land. But what I find with narcissists is they never level those kinds of jokes at themselves, and never. And then if you zing them back. They get kind of pissy. They get real pissy, and it's not. In some cases, not pretty.
This game anymore. I'm going to take my ball and go home.
Yeah, absolutely, and just very angry. Or like, butt out of it. I'm like, butt out of it. You said this. There's no butt out of it. You got me into it. Right. So now you deal.
You're there like, dude, that was really mean, and you're like, have you been listening to the conversation for the last 10 minutes?
Yeah, Now it's all about. It kind of sucks when you're on the other end of it, doesn't it? That kind of thing. But you said something a second ago,
which it shouldn't if it's taken in the right spirit. I completely agree with you, but it's true, right? If you're again, it disrupts the story that you are the hero,
right?
If people are taking you down a peg.
See, and to speak to that point, when with a narcissist, with normal people, what I see when they step into that frame, and they're self-deprecating. It doesn't, it's almost like they sort of just quelled. Oh, this was the big secret. Whatever the thing was in the room. Now they own it. Now you got nothing on them, as opposed to the person who keeps trying to hide everything. And then when you do expose it, because they don't have a good level of self-deprecation or any of that, because that's I guess what narcissists are, right? They just lose their shit completely when. They're faced with a zinger or just even an observation of a mistake, right?
Right. Yeah. That's right. Because if you assume that your self-worth is largely bound up in other people's reactions to you, then at that moment when they're laughing at you for something, or you just believe that they're laughing at you because you made a mistake. And, the other thing is when you're, particularly with these vulnerable narcissists where it's a zero-sum game, they'll go out of their way to find the mistakes that other people make and to point them out, because every time that somebody else is taken down a peg, they move up. It's a zero-sum game.
Right.
And so the flip side of that is, if they make a mistake, they're covering it up or they're blaming it on somebody else because they don't want, they feel like if they come down a peg, then everyone else rises up. And so they're not really taking this in a spirit of, what allows most of us to succeed in life is that ability to recognize that we made a mistake, own that mistake, learn from that mistake, and move on. And that process is derailed in the narcissist because they're not going to own the mistake.
Right. And then it gets back to that whole, survival by omission. Like you can't admit that somebody helped you. There's no mentors. There's no boost to your career. It was just, I'm Venus on the half shell. I came from the ocean. I arose here.
Yeah.
Here I am.
Yeah. Exactly. Fully formed and perfect in every way.
Yeah. Right. There's no origin story with these people.
It's a boring origin story.
Right.
God came down. And by his divine hand or her divine hand or whatever it is, I was touched by God and came out, in this form. And that's look, people don't succeed. That's not the true origin story of anybody. But if you make that your origin story, it's hard to live up to it.
Yeah, 100%. And then you get real. I got some friends in my personal life that you can see the traits. They get real defensive when you bring up something that would challenge the origin, right? And not even to challenge it, but just like you people in 30, 40 years now, they're in a different space in life, and all of a sudden, they pretend like you didn't know them 40 years ago, 35 years ago, and you're like, dude, yeah, we played in a band together. I mean, we used to get hot dogs behind the 7-Eleven and beer because we had no money. Like,
right, yeah.
Were you there, or was it like a ghost, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, because I read in one of your articles that that wealth can be connected to higher levels of narcissism. And, I'm not here to bash, money or anything. I like money. But do you find this to be more inherited wealth or people that actually had to earn it themselves?
Well, it can be either. One of the things that wealth permits, because wealth tends to create power. So wealth creates, one of the ways to think about this is that wealth creates the circumstances under which people who have developed a tendency towards narcissism can express that more easily. Mm-hmm. When you have very little power of any kind, it's hard to succeed as a narcissist.
Yeah.
because you're not that special, and no one's gonna go along with you and tell you how great you are. So what wealth does is it creates more power. It creates more opportunity for you to control your own destiny. And so, look, there are plenty of wealthy people who aren't narcissists,
right?
But and they acknowledge all of the people who helped them along the way, and they're philanthropic, and they give back to all the folks who played a significant role in helping them to get where they are. But if you have a tendency towards narcissism and you're wealthy, it really exacerbates that tendency, because you can get away with disowning the people who helped you get where you are, and to surround yourself with people who want to be in the presence of that wealth, who will fawn over you, and so it creates, you can really nurture it. Mm-hmm. With when you have some money.
Well, so and not to get too into the weeds, like politically or anything like that, but there's some personalities that I wouldn't mind kind of discussing. The easy part first, obviously, would be Donald Trump. Like him or not, I mean, in my view, he pretty much does what every president does, except for he sends meaner tweets to people, but. He's got these traits that he's not good at hiding. I mean, you got to be a narcissist, right? I mean, I've dealt with some politics on a low local level, and the amount of what I would see people do, just to be a city councilman somewhere, right? And I'm thinking, gosh, what kind of ego do you have to go try to be president of the United States and to deal with that level of scrutiny and still pull it off like, hey, I'm just a regular guy, right? He doesn't have that defense mechanism. He doesn't have that filter, it seems. And it just seems like class 1 level narcissism, almost like on a Mussolini kind of a level where, just everything he says is great and he's the funniest guy on earth and da-da-da-da. Excuse me, is that something that's accurate, or are they just calling him a narcissist, but he's just a sociopath? I don't know.
Well, look, I mean, let's take this in stages. First of all, as I said at the very beginning, I think narcissists are overrepresented in certain kinds of professions, and politics and entertainment are two of them. And I also agree with your characterization. The higher up you go in elected office, the more likely that some amount of that narcissism is part of who you are. I wouldn't say that everyone who runs for Congress or the Senate or the presidency is a narcissist, but there's certainly a higher proportion of folks with that set of characteristics who are even running for those offices, because you're putting yourself through hell, a lot of scrutiny, a lot of you're putting your family through a lot of things. Every decision you've ever made is being called out. So I think you'd be hard pressed to find a lot of people in high level elected office in the United States who aren't scoring pretty highly on these narcissism inventories. I'm reluctant to say anything in particular about any particular politician, because I haven't gone out and asked them a bunch of questions, and what we see could very well be a curated image. That's part of the problem with trying to understand people is you need to be dealing with them more on a one-on-one basis to really be able to say much about them.
Sure.
And I think the problem with Trump is certainly vocal on Twitter and speaks. Says a lot of things that I might expect a narcissist to say,
right,
in stump speeches and things like that. What we can't know without knowing him personally better is how much of this is a reflection of just who he is, reflected unfiltered for the American public, and how much of this is an act, right? Or at least amplified for the purposes of creating a persona that has a particular set of characteristics. And I honestly, I just don't know the answer to that.
Well, and I guess, and then, I really didn't care until he started running for president, and then I guess he just dropped out this week. But when I saw Michael Bloomberg, basically bribe his way onto the debate stage, blah, 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 it just seemed like he was shocked that he had stuff thrown at him that is not hard to find. It's like he lives in such an isolated bubble, like you said, and he may or may not be narcissist, I don't know, but that he surrounds himself with so many yes people. Yeah, running for president would be a great idea. Forget the time. Forget the time that you told the pregnant woman in your employ to kill it. Good work. Like none of this was going to come back. He seemed absolutely floored when Elizabeth Warren, of all people, said, "So you're going to release these people from their NDAs right now?" And you're going, "Dang, geez, did you not see that? How did you not see that coming?
How did you not see that oncoming train?"
Yeah, and he seemed flummoxed, like genuinely fucking shocked that she would say that.
No, I hear you, but this is no different than Bernie Sanders, and who has a whole host of comments about Fidel Castro and other people, which again, people can take that in different ways, but clearly that's the sort of thing that opposition is going to take advantage of, and he doesn't seem to care about that. Bill Clinton, had. There were persistent rumors about his infidelity.
Oh, there were facts about his infidelity.
For years before he even ran for president.
Right.
They used to. I believe that the term of art in his campaign was that they were always worried about the next guarding against the next bimbo eruption. I believe that.
I read Chris Hitchens' book on the subject. It was he chronicled the presidency from 90, before, when he was still governor, up until 2001, and it was just one big grease fire after the next. Not even talking about legislatively, which was a disaster, but just kind of the bimbo eruption, and the bullying of these women, and just that attitude of we got to contain this, and then again, seeming shocked that this is the thing that blows my mind with these people. We're not spring chickens. We've done things. I'm just never shocked. If someone in my past brings something up, if they know it and I know it, and something, maybe I'm not too proud of it, but I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh geez, what a grease fire.
Yeah.
Right? But
right, no, that's right, and of course, it's so I would say, the fact is, anyone who puts themselves up to be president and expects that this stuff is not going to come out, I think, obviously Donald Trump had a lot of stuff in his past that he was aware of and was paying people not to talk about,
at least he was aware. He paid him.
Yeah, he didn't cop to paying him until he presented a check to him. That was a whole other issue. But to me, that's I think that there is a certain amount of, I think it is related to this notion of narcissism, that you're just going to assume that your sheer brilliance and force of personality is going to outweigh any of those little problems from your past. That who would even bring that stuff up,
right,
about you, and that's. And so, and of course, the interesting thing about American politics about, with this is narcissists have been around for an awfully long time. And for a long time, we sort of played by a set of rules in which we didn't bring that stuff up, really.
Right.
You go back in history and you find out about the various, mistresses of presidents and other things, and we didn't, it's only been fairly recently that we reported on those extensively in the popular press. I mean, there were always rumors, and whisperings during presidential campaigns in the past. But
it was now up until JFK, it was a quid pro quo, though, right? Like it wasn't until like 5 years after he got killed that Judith Exner put that book out, and then everyone but the press was shocked. But, Pierre Salinger was really good at, look, you report this, I'll tell your wife about what you were doing at the Drake Hotel when we were in Chicago, right? And so, and then, okay. Yeah. So you had buy-in. But then, Exner's book came out in 1968, and then that just was like this big floodgate. Not too long later, you had Gary Hart. Not too long after that, Clinton. And it just became this big, like now it's just like a part of the deal. Like with Obama, I'm like, how does he not have some random girlfriend come out from the woodwork? He was married a long time, and nothing. Guy's a Boy Scout. I mean, politically, foreign policy. That's a whole another hour. But as far as his personal life goes, married to the same woman, got a couple of kids. Finished law school, kind of a humdrum life in his personal life, just sort of married, and none of these weird. Stories, circulate. Bush 1 had a mistress. When I read that, I was going, what? That shocked me. Obama, I would expect to be kind of smooth and, hey, how you doing? But Bush 1 had a mistress? I'm like, good Lord. But the one thing I was going to ask you, because we got some time left, is, I guess to preface what I'm going to ask you, are you still practicing? Or are you teaching and then doing the two guys on your head?
So I'm a cognitive psychologist. I like to point out to people I don't really care about other people's problems. So I didn't go in a clinical direction from the time I got my degree. I've been a researcher my whole career, and so I got my degree in psychology as a cognitive psychologist. Took a university job, first at Northwestern, then Columbia, and then here at Texas, And so, I do research. I write for popular. I think where a lot of this more popular work that I do, including Two Guys on Your Head, where that came from was, about 15 years ago now. I got just one too many times turning on the television and listening to Congress debating about cutting off research funding for the social, behavioral, and economic sciences at the National Science Foundation. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is, I totally understand people interested in finding places where we waste money. But one of the things that happens when you look at scientific research is that you can't even understand the titles of grant proposals in chemistry and physics and areas like that unless you're in the field because of the impenetrable jargon. And psychologists use a lot of the same words that everybody else uses, although we often use them in narrower technical ways. So if we talk about motivation, or we talk about narcissism, or we talk about well-being, these are all things. People know what happiness is. That is, they've experienced it, generally speaking. But that doesn't mean scientifically we actually understand what factors cause people to be happy or unhappy. So the fact that people walk around believing that they've encountered these concepts before in their daily lives often makes them skeptical of us doing research to try and actually understand them in a deeper way. And as a result, we often downplay the significance of research in areas like psychology. Well, my view, and this, going back 15 years when one too many times I heard them dismissing this research, I said, well, somebody's just got to get out there and explain why the stuff that we've learned as a field actually matters to people's daily lives. Because as I like to point out, pretty much everybody I know has a mind. Almost nobody knows how that mind works. Mm-hmm. And I believe people would live their lives better and differently if they understood more about the way that minds work, their own and other people's. And so I after looking in the mirror and saying, gosh, I wish somebody would get out there and tell people why this stuff matters, I began to say, what if I pretend it's literally my fault that nobody understands why the research that gets done in psychology matters? And as a result of that, I started doing a little bit more outward-facing kind of work, which meant at first blogging for places like Psychology Today and later Fast Company. When an opportunity came along to do this radio show, I jumped at that, and that's where Two Guys on Your Head came from. But also, working with companies and trying to help them to bring more of this into what they do, and speaking to various groups, whether it's medical professionals or teachers or corporate folks or nonprofits, and just trying to find opportunities to give people more understanding of the way that their minds work. And so that's become a bigger part of my job over the years. The Human Dimensions of Organizations program at the University of Texas does that for the liberal arts broadly. And so the program takes the humanities, social, and behavioral sciences, tries to teach people in organizations, business, government, nonprofits, and military about people. Because a lot of us wake up each day and the biggest problems that we have to solve are people problems.
Right.
Finance is easy. Accounting is easy, relatively speaking. What's hard is getting people to do what you want them to do,
right,
because they want to do it, and solving these interpersonal problems. So in many ways, the application of all these disciplines, I think, is crucial to solving a lot of the kinds of problems that we deal with. And my commitment as an academic, as somebody who's got this perch at the University of Texas, is my commitment is to help people understand a little bit more of the research that might actually change the way they do what they do.
Well, see, and then, so in your research, obviously, other practicing clinicians would read this, right?
Yeah.
And so, what is a recommendation? Because how do you treat this? Because because the narcissist isn't going to figure it out himself, because he's kind of an asshole. She's kind of an asshole. So it's kind of like, unless it comes to their attention, and they, like an alcoholic, maybe they hit bottom, where their livelihood is threatened, or the family's going to leave them, then they finally, start acknowledging, okay, maybe I'm whatever. But but how do you, like, for example, if someone deigns to see a counselor, how does that counselor kind of, besides saying, hey man, you're kind of an asshole? They just, how do they bring up that you may be a narcissist, or maybe your husband's not wrong, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is actually a lot of narcissists are aware of their own narcissism. So one of the things that's fascinating is there's a guy named Brad Bushman who developed what he calls the one-item narcissism scale, where you basically ask people on a scale from 1 to 7, how much of a narcissist are you?
Okay.
And you explain to people what a narcissist is in case they don't know. And honestly, people are pretty good at making that judgment. It's not a it's often not a complete surprise to most people that they're a narcissist. The thing is that there's an old joke in psychology that how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is only one, but the light bulb has to want to change. And
I've never heard that. That's good.
And that is, there's something deeply true about that. So part of the thing about narcissists is they may be aware that they're a narcissist, but they don't really feel like they need to change.
Right.
And so part of the issue is, can you help people to realize that there are goals that are really important to them that they are systematically unable to achieve because of the way that they behave. Mm-hmm. And it's only in that context, I think, that you can get people to admit, yeah, I'm going to have to start doing things a little bit differently. And then, in a lot of ways, the way you would treat this, to the extent you think of it as a treatment, is to do it from the outside in. I think a lot of times we think, oh, you got to fix things from the inside out. But for a lot of issues that people are experiencing, the trick is to fix them from the outside in, meaning start with behaviors. Mm-hmm. So teach people to listen a little bit more and to to start paying attention to other people's reactions. And so even if, so for example, you pointed out that, you insult a narcissist and their first reaction is to get really pissed off. Well, the alternative is to say to somebody, so when somebody good-naturedly insults you, whatever you're feeling inside, smile and say, wow, that was a good one. Mm-hmm. Because that, more than anything else, you're just trying to change the nature of the interactions you're having with people. And what's interesting is over time, when you behave in a way that's a little bit more appropriate, that is, you behave in a way that's a little bit less narcissistic, you will find yourself often being less stung by some of the things that bothered you in the past. Mm-hmm. So you can actually begin to change your attitudes by first changing some of your behaviors.
Wow, that's and see, and that's the thing is like, well, and then Well, I mean, do you find that people come? It's like they have a come to Jesus moment, or do they kind of realize that maybe they could use some help before the crash? Like they see some results and go, maybe I should see somebody, or is it like do they just when they finally seek treatment, not even for narcissism, but just treatment in general, to see a counselor? Or have they just hit such a bottom before they get there, and then they're like, yeah, I might be a narcissist, or what have you found?
I think it's all kinds, right? I mean, I think certainly the most dramatic stories are the ones where somebody really hits a bottom. But a lot of times it's just some kind of setback. And it doesn't even have to be a significant one. I mean, so it could be a relationship breaks up, or sometimes it's just some other life moment.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody will, for example, I just did this new book in last June called Bring Your Brain to Work. And I talk about how a lot of times people will not contemplate taking on a new career path, even though they're manifestly unhappy in what they're doing. They won't really consider an alternative career path until they experience some kind of personal tragedies. They have a health scare or the death of a loved one, and then that wakes them up, and they think, I need to change my career. And I think you see the same sort of thing sometimes with respect to people who will ultimately seek counseling, where a personal tragedy of some kind, whether it's an illness of their own or of a loved one, where they think, you know what, I'm unhappy. And I need help with that. And so they may not hit bottom per se, but they experience something that is their wake up call.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, man, it's well, I mean, the human condition is just it's crazy. I had the last show that we had. There's this guy, activist. He'd been involved in a lot of stuff over the years, and he came on and kind of we kind of debated Bernie a little bit. I don't know, well, the whole hour is pretty much Bernie. But, one of the things he was talking about is how, a lot of these third parties, whatever, they come out every 4 years. They don't really do the groundwork. And then all of a sudden they show up every 4 years. Voila, we're at, vote for us. And he's like, they're not doing the work. And I said, well, you're speaking to human nature. That's not a political failing. That's like a human nature thing. There's always a guy in the group thinks he could do a better job, breaks off, starts another group. Look at the various terror organizations that we have all over the world. Some of them are self-defense organizations, but regardless, one guy was here, started a thing, got enough size. The other guys are like, no, you know what? You're not doing this, and this, right? And then it's just this tendency to the ego. I can do it better, and I'm going to go break off and go do my own thing. Bands break up all the time because of that. Right.
Sure.
And so are we kind of spinning our wheels, or is it just a big? Are we kind of spinning our wheels, or is human nature just destined to just take us over, and no matter how hard we work, we just don't change?
Well, look, I think as individuals, we can always change, but it's also true that for our most deeply held beliefs, it's very hard to see somebody do something that is different from what we would have wanted. It's hard for us to see the decision go against the way we would have done it. And it's hard for us to recognize those cases in which we wanted something really badly. Somebody else wanted something different. Their side got what they wanted, and you admit, yeah, you know what, that's not actually a terrible idea.
Right.
And I think that's a common thing. It's very hard to do that. And in fact, you see this in organizations all the time, that it's people will have a decision go against them, and they'll passive aggressively not really implement whatever the decision was because they didn't like it in the first place.
Right.
And I feel like, one of the things that people have to learn is, you take your best shot. And then if the decision goes against you, you move on to the next, you support what happened wholeheartedly. It's or leave.
Right.
But don't undermine it. And so I think that it's hard. It's hard to lose. It's hard to be on the wrong side of things. It's hard to feel like, and it's hard to sit by and watch things go imperfectly. And the other thing is, I mean, there's the classic finding now, the Dunning-Kruger effect, this idea that the people who are who are the worst performers in any domain are the least well calibrated about how bad they are. And the reason is they think to themselves, well, how hard could this really be? Because they don't really understand what expert performance requires. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem as well. So when you talk about somebody jumping into a political race and not doing their full due diligence, they look at what's going on television. They think, how hard could this be? Mm-hmm.
No, I've had those people on my show, and some some of them drive me crazy because I'm going, listen, I'm not running. I'm just asking you, how come you don't know this? You should know this, right? And I'm not. It's not gotcha questions. It's like, well, what are your ideas for XYZ policy? Oh, I haven't really thought of that before. Whoa, you're running for office. That's a big. You should have thought of that before, kind of a thing, right?
Right. Well, and in some ways, I again, you look at Bloomberg's performance in that first debate. And, it was almost like he thought, well, how hard, I've seen these people. I've been on TV before. I owned a TV station. How hard could it be to be in a debate in front of all these people? And the answer was actually hard.
Well, yeah, because it's almost like he ran for mayor, which was still a big city, but it's comparing college to the NFL.
Yeah.
It's like, you were the big star in high school. You're Matt Leinart. You're the big star at USC. Then you get in the NFL and you flame out. And why? Because the best of everybody is in the NFL, not just the college guys. And
these folks have been at it a long time. And
up until your first year in the NFL, you've been at it for a long time, but they've been at it longer in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
And so,
whenever you're good at something, you start assuming you could be good at anything.
Right.
And it's really useful every once in a while to take up something you're really not good at, and to remind yourself how much work goes into becoming good at something.
See, and to kind of speak back to that wealth piece in that article that I referenced earlier. I'm 56 years old now, and so I've got a lot of friends that have done a lot of different things, and some of them have gotten really, really wealthy, which is awesome. But I watched them go from like our level when we were kids to becoming wealthy, and all of a sudden now they're like an expert on everything.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, they took a sommelier class, and now they know, like, okay, that was a class. You're not the same guy. You're not even Robert Mondavi. And like, so chill out.
Right.
It goes on and on and on. They like any enterprise they want to get into because they're successful in this one line of business or work. Now they want to advise on everything. And even if they're an investor, they got to horn their way into it. And you're kind of going, well, hang on, you're investing in these experts. Let them do their thing.
Right.
And it doesn't seem like it just seems like that's why I was asking about that article that I read last week when we first started communicating.
Yeah, no, I think that's and I think that's it's common, right? It's common to just assume I've had success, so I can pretty much do anything.
Right. Awesome, man. Well, hey, listen. I'm definitely gonna put the stuff in the notes. Is there a specific website you want me to reference for you as we're wrapping up? Let the listeners know.
If people want to find me, I have a website, smartthinkingbook.com that has links to all the books I've written and some blog entries and stuff. And I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook. Always love to have people connect up. I write pretty regularly I write weekly for Fast Company, pretty regularly for Psychology Today and Harvard Business Review, and of course, Two Guys in Your Head is out weekly. So, and on iTunes and Stitcher and all that good stuff. So,
awesome. Well, appreciate your time, Dr. Markman. Thanks for coming on. And guys, our guest has been Dr. Art Markman. We've rattled off his credits at the beginning of the show, but for sure you can find him on Two Guys on Your Head, out of KUT here in Texas, but also on most NPR stations. And, again, if this stuff makes you uncomfortable, it's supposed to. Sleep tight.